I've been on the board of RSL Care for nearly 3 years now. We've been on a really a board-led strategic journey to become a customer-centric organisation. We could see the changes that were happening in the aged care and related industries, consumer-directed care policies, NDIS, and knew that we had to change culturally. We had to embark on deep cultural change to become a customer-centric organisation. The journey has really been one about reframing the organisation through the eyes of its customers. I think, like many aged care organisations, we had thought more about government programs, government funding programs, rather than thinking about who are our customers, understanding who they are, how they're different. So we've done quite a lot of work on segmentation. We actually set up an innovation hub to do that work, and it was customer-led. So we actually did the research around customer segments. We actually brought representatives of those customer segments on board, ran really deep focus groups with them. They weren't just people who were using services now, but future consumers and also carers, to help us actually define the customer and understand what the value proposition was for them, what sort of products and services they were looking for now and in the future. And we've used that as a platform basically to completely reshape our strategy and to redefine our business model in readiness for this new consumer-directed environment. I think that one of the big challenges for aged care organisations sometimes is that they underestimate their customers and their consumers, and never underestimate them. They know what they want, they know what they're after, and if they don't, they've got lots of really good people around them who will help them. So I think that was the greatest insight. The other insight was really just, I suppose, how important their independence and their freedom is, to be able to stay as well and healthy and independent as they can be. People will stay as far away as they can from residential care and any form of institutionalisation, even though for some that may be an option, but people want to be helped in their own home, and they do want to have choice and a range of services that will keep them well and active and participating and engaged. Well, in terms of the changes that are going to happen from February 2017, I mean, the big change is that consumers can, if they choose, basically self-direct their own care and their own packages, which means that theoretically they should be able to choose who their provider is, what services come together within the scope of their assessed package to meet their needs, and in what setting they have that delivered. I think that last point is really important for people who are thinking about what consumer-directed care looks like in residential care. So that's obviously going to be the major change. And so what that means is that home care, community care, aged care providers today, they need to be thinking about how can they be really special? How can they deliver a great customer experience that really has that wow factor so that people want to stay with them? And better still, they're going to tell other people that's the organisation to go to if you actually want a good experience with your home care. So I suspect that the world isn't going to shift in February 2017. I think that from the work that I do, not just with RSL Care but in other organisations, I think that there actually is a tremendous amount of loyalty with a lot of particularly home care organisations at the moment. So I think the key is actually going to be empowering consumers, really empowering consumers. And I think where providers have to step up is to actually do that. Not have someone else do it, but actually empower consumers to be able to choose and self-direct. I think it's about, first of all, it is about all of your service design being customer-led. So that is just, the underlying principle now from which strategy needs to be designed from. You don't do anything unless you actually have an evidence base that helps you to understand that what you're doing is actually going to meet a need in the market. So being customer-led is actually going to be really critical, and then responding to those needs. So it is about actually making sure that you've got the range of services available for people. And that's going to be a bit of test and see. There's no way that we can all start from February 2017 and have it all in place. The really good organisations, I think, are going to be the ones that are nimble enough to get it in place quickly. And I think what that means is that, it means two things, I think. It means that you have to be very clear about what you're good at, what your core capability is, and which part of the value chain you're going to deliver, but where you need to partner with others. And I think the real skill is to be able to do that both at an organisation-wide level and also in local communities where people live. So actually the service provider has some resonance with them. I think it's very important, but I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about what quality means to consumers. Now, I think there's going to have to be a seismic shift about how quality is measured in consumer-directed care. Again, aged care providers have been so used to formal accreditation systems, which basically set minimum standards, and basically then providers self-assess with some external auditing about whether they meet those standards or not. I think the shift that needs to happen is actually understanding what actually is it that the provider does that actually engages the consumer, that actually creates that wow factor where they actually feel they want to keep coming back for more. Well, in terms of quality in a free market, consumer-directed environment, I think there's going to need to be a seismic shift about how we actually think about measuring and defining quality, and doing that through the eyes of the consumer. So we actually need to, this is where we get back to this point about everything being customer, consumer-led, so that we actually do understand what does create that wow factor for consumers. We have to find ways of actually measuring the customer experience. And I think that, getting back to board governance around this, it's about actually making sure that when we design our products and services, when we design all of our processes, that they are actually designed to create a seamless, positive experience for customers. I think that quality for consumers is actually a mix of rational and emotional factors. And I think that in aged care, it's mostly emotional. So it's very much about trust, it's very much about integrity, it's very much about feeling passionate about the brand and what it is that the provider does that actually makes people feel safe and secure and empowered and more independent to live their lives the way they want to. I think this is the other big business shift that a lot of not-for-profit organisations actually need to make. I like the term shared value. I think that's the concept that we need to be thinking about now, which means that organisations need to be profitable. They actually do need to generate a surplus. They can't be for loss. The key differentiating point is what they actually do with that surplus, and they reinvest back into the business, back into creating shared economic, social and environmental impact in communities. So that's the core purpose for not-for-profit mission-based organisations, which means that they will always be true to their mission if they can shift their philosophy and their way of thinking in a business sense to work in a more business-like way. I think that this is where, the measuring performance becomes really important. And we are going to actually need to have an understanding of how our business is changing. We need to understand what the revenue is particular points in time. We need to understand particularly some measure of volume, what sort of number of hours of service we're actually delivering. We need to be measuring customer retention. We need to be measuring attraction of customers, and we need to understand where they're coming from, how they're finding out about us. We need to be able to get pictures of what sorts of services people are actually using. And this gets back to what I said earlier about the segmentations, where there actually is a bit of science around some of that in terms of starting to understand how people use what sorts of services for what purposes. So I think that there's a whole lot of work that is happening, certainly happening in RSL care. More needs to happen about actually putting some metrics around measuring the performance and being able to track, where we're going in terms of, travelling against targets and performance and that sort of thing. I chair the Strategy and Capital Committee, and I guess what keeps me up at night is the challenge I think at the moment we face, and I suspect all organisations do, is how do you continue with your core business? How do you manage the core while you are radically changing the future business model? How do you actually, you're basically running two business models at once. And an added complexity for RSL care is, of course, we've just recently announced the merger with RDNS, which we're really excited about, and that's been quite a deliberate strategic move on both boards. So there's very significant change management and execution that actually goes with implementing these big changes as well. So I think that's the big challenge at the moment. Well, I think that was a very significant strategic choice that RSL Care Board needed to make. I suppose it would be reasonable to say that before the merger we were a mid-sized player, very much based in Queensland, some services in New South Wales, and probably looking much the same as a lot of our competitors. So, the big question for us, particularly armed with the consumer information that we had, was how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we actually get scale so that we can actually become a national provider and grow the home care, in-home care side of the business. So the merger made great sense for us. Those sorts of strategic choices are going to be different for different sorts of boards. So for instance, if you're a smaller community-based organisation working in a particular local community, your board is going to face very significant questions about whether they actually have the scale to be able to continue in this new market-based environment. So for them, mergers are one opportunity. I'm starting to see more of them starting to look at cooperative models where they actually come together, keep their local identities but share back office functions. But whichever way you look at this, these are strategic choices that need to be board-led, and they need to be sort of conscious decisions and evidence-based decisions made about which pathway you take. In terms of the key message to the CEO and RSL Care Board, we said that 2 years ago. Our key message to the CEO was we need to become a customer-centric organisation. That's the journey we need to begin, so let's work together. And we did that together. I think that's the other key point to make about governance in this space, is that it has to be a really positive, engaged relationship with your CEO, your senior executive team, and your staff more generally, and your customers, your consumers and customers, to actually bring this change about. But that's the core change that needs to happen. Workforce is a key challenge. Just having sufficient of the right sort of staff in place at the right time for this more dynamic market-based environment that we're working in is really important. And so some of the principles that I've just been talking about in terms of understanding your customers' insights and needs and taking the lead from them, I think apply equally to your staff. So we're all people with needs and families and expectations and values about what the meaning of work is and who we want to work for. So I think it's really understanding your staff, understanding the locations in which you operate and who the prospective new staff could be, and actually trying to come up with an employee value proposition that is just too good to refuse. I guess the other comment that I would make, and this is looking at some of the customer-led feedback we've had, I mean, most customers actually want to relate to a smaller number of people as possible. So we do also need to be thinking about how we can approach the building of shifts and how we define work, how we define who does the work, so that consumers do actually relate with people who almost become like companions and friends to sort of support them on their journey of wellness and well-being. I think that if a board has not actually commenced this journey of change by now, I would be seriously questioning whether they actually should be staying in the business. These changes are quite profound, and I would not want to be on a board that did not start these conversations several years ago. Because there's a long way to go, and it's almost like the more you scratch the surface of it, the more you actually learn and realise how much further you have to go. So I think that would be my key message to a board that hasn't really thought about it before, or more importantly, and I think this is actually more dangerous, is when a board actually never thought it was going to happen. You know, they're the boards that I'd be worried about, and I think they really need to ask serious questions about whether they should be staying in the business. In terms of other comments that I'd like to make, I think that, again, this project is about governance, and I think we need to be thinking quite a bit more about board governance and what a contemporary, well-governed board is like in this environment. So in RSL Care, we have actually moved to an independent, skills-based board. We do actually have board profiles, director profiles, which we recruit to competitively, and the directors are actually remunerated. Now, that was a very significant change for an organisation like RSL Care to make, and involved deep stakeholder engagement and took quite a bit of time. So I think that's another comment that I would make, because this conversation that we're having is actually about strategy, and it does actually have to be led by the board. And these are very, very significant shifts in terms of moving from, if you like, the straitjacket of government regulation, where providers have actually just seen government almost as being the customer, to one where they actually need to define their own customers and start to learn how to deliver exceptional customer service and exceptional customer experiences to the people they serve. The other insight, the other key message I think I would have is that making these changes involves resources. You know, it involves capital, and it also involves human resources, and it also involves new intellectual property, sometimes that you've actually got to bring in from outside. So boards have to be prepared to make that investment, to actually do it with purpose. So you obviously need to get the returns, but the investment is significant. And that would be another reason why some organisations would need to be thinking about getting scale in order to actually be competitive and sustainable in this new market-led environment. That's where your cash flow becomes really important, and that's where being able to have the capital and the balance sheet to be able to support those sorts of changes becomes really important. It also means that, you know, from a board perspective, the skills base and the capability of the senior executive team. So traditionally boards have always had the key relationship, you know, the key role is to appoint and monitor the performance of the CEO. I think in these changing environments, boards actually need to be have a line of vision in terms of the senior executive team more generally, and making sure that you've got the capabilities and the skill base that you need to actually be sustainable in this new market-based environment. In terms of disruption, I think that the industry is being disrupted at the moment, and the new skill set that organisations really need to be coming to terms with is the whole digital online space. We need to be looking at ways in which we actually develop digital capabilities, not just in marketing, but actually as a channel to market as well. And of course, the more that you can actually enable consumers to do for themselves, to self-manage their packages, not only does that potentially work for them, but financially it can work well for the organisation as well. So I do think that looking at that digital space, there are a number of new business models that are on the market now, particularly the peer-to-peer models, which are basically cutting out the service providers and where the care workers and the care seekers are coming together. And basically the care seeker, often a family or carer member, is selecting one person who actually provides the full range of services. So those sorts of digital models, I think, are really starting to get people thinking about their current business model and how they actually deliver their services and the importance of IT and digital platforms in helping them do that.